Okay, so I think that I am going to start in a second just by doing a few kind of housekeeping rules and let everyone know how today and the other sessions are going to work. Okay, so just I'll keep admitting people, I guess, as I start, but as we're now just after 1:30, I will start. So, hi everyone, my name is Amber. I know quite a lot of you, and I don't know quite a lot of you, so if I haven't met you yet, then nice to meet you. I am an ocean scientist, and specifically, I'm a marine biologist, which means that I study all of the animals that live in the sea. And a lot of what I do is I do a lot of science. I work in labs and I look at tiny creatures down microscopes and do a lot of data stuff and maths. But then the other half of my time, I actually spend trying to work out how to get all this science into all the laws that the governments make to protect our environment, and specifically the deep sea. So today, I'm going to be focusing on the weird and wonderful creatures that live in the deep sea, because that's what I'm most passionate about. And then in the sessions over the next few weeks, what I'm going to do is get some of my friends that I work with to come and join us. And they're going to talk about all the different parts of the sea and all the cool things that live in it, because it's quite big and I don't know everything. And I know that you're going to ask me loads of questions today that I'm not going to know the answers to, because the sea is really big. But I promise that I will find out the answers as well. So, just a few housekeeping rules for the parents and I guess some of the children that are know how to use technology. There's a few different options of how you can interact with me today. For the first 15 minutes, I'm going to do a presentation about the deep sea, and there's going to be lots of videos and pictures and cool things to learn of crazy fish with big teeth and things. And then after that 15 minutes, I'm going to get you all to ask me questions, and I'll answer all the questions I can about the deep sea. So because everyone's muted now, what I'm going to do at the end is there is an option for people on an iPad or an iPhone. There are 3 little dots at the bottom of your screen if you tap it that say more. And in there, when you tap it, it says raise hand. So if you want to ask a question, you raise your hand and it will show me that you've put your hand up and you want to ask a question. So that's how we'll do that. If you change your mind and you don't want to ask a question anymore, or somebody's already asked it, then you click on the same button and you put your hand down. Also, there's reactions in there if you want to put a thumbs up or clap and whatever throughout the presentation, that's fine too. And then if you're a little bit shy and you don't want to be on video or on audio asking your question at the end, then there is an option in that same button for you to be able to do chat. And then that means that basically you ask your question at the end in the chat and you just type it out. So that's absolutely fine. Just so all the parents know, this is going to be archived on our YouTube channel where we do ocean science outreach. So if you don't want the video to be on the screen, then I would advise you turn your videos off now. And I would also advise that throughout the 15 minutes when I'm presenting, that you have the video and audio off, because it will allow the videos that I'm playing to come through a little bit better. And I'll have mine off as well. And then we'll all turn our videos back on at the end to ask all the questions. So I think that's everything, and I'm going to get on with it because this is all the boring stuff, and we've still got some people joining, but hopefully I can still add them while I'm presenting, and I'm sorry if I can't. So let's get on with it and learn about the deep sea. Just going to share my screen so that you can see some cool stuff. Okay. Okay, can I get people to give me a thumbs up like this if they can see the screen? Cool. And I'll move these out of the way. Thank you very much for all those thumbs up. I enjoyed that a lot. Okay, so let's start the session. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about the part of the oceans that I spend most of my time working on, and that's called the deep sea. Our oceans take up 70% of our planet, and you can see from this picture that that really is why we call it our blue planet. And I bet you didn't know that 90% of the oceans are called the deep sea. So all the pictures you usually see of the oceans with all the colourful fish, lots of light and coral reef, they only make up 10% of our oceans, which is only the bit above this blue line here. So all the pictures you've mostly seen of the sea only come from this top 10% above 200 metres. So, as I was saying, the deep sea begins below this red line here, below 200 metres. And that's because this is where there is no longer enough light for tiny plants to grow. These tiny plants are the little green blobs that you can see up here, and they're called phytoplankton, and they come in lots of different shapes and sizes. But the main thing they have in common is they're all tiny and they're all green, just like plants on land. On land, plants are at the base of our food chain. And if you haven't learnt about food chains yet, I've got one here. So, a food chain shows how energy passes in the form of food from one organism to another. So, if on land, the plants are at the base of the food chain, they grow by making their own energy from sunlight. And then animals eat these plants, like this cow here. And then other animals, like humans, come along and eat these animals and take their energy. And that's how energy passes through the food chain, from sun to plants to animals to bigger animals. In the sea, it's exactly the same. Oh, got the Zoom chat coming up here. In the sea, it's exactly the same. So, the plants of the sea are these tiny phytoplankton, which are these green blobs that you can see in the bottom right-hand corner of the picture now. They're just like plants on land because they use energy from the sun to make their own energy. And then larger animals like this fish come along and eat the phytoplankton. And then even bigger fish will come along, like sharks, and eat the fish and steal their energy. So that's how the food chain works in the sea, exactly the same as on land, but the plants are the phytoplankton. So you might be thinking, if all these tiny phytoplankton plants can only live in this top 200 metres of the oceans, how do all the rest of the poor animals eat in the deep sea? Well, when phytoplankton and the animals that eat them die, they fall through the water like this. And when this happens, it's called marine snow because it looks just like it's snowing in the deep sea. The marine snow now becomes the base of the food chain below 200 metres, and small animals will eat the marine snow, and then bigger fish will eat the smaller fish that ate the marine snow, and then animals like sharks will come and eat them. This is what marine snow looks like in real life. These are videos from the coast of Plymouth in Devon in the UK, where we used our underwater robot, he's called Rex, yes, we gave him a name, to explore the shallow coastal waters around our coasts. You can see it looks like a blizzard here. There's so much marine snow in shallow waters. But when you get deeper in the sea, it looks much more like a very slow and gentle bit of snow that we might see at home. This is because as you get deeper and deeper into the oceans, more and more of these animals have eaten up the marine snow as it's falling. So there's much less and less of it. This means that animals are much more far apart in the deep sea as they're swimming around desperately trying to find something to eat. The deep sea below 1,000 metres, which is this line here, is also completely dark, so none of the animals can see anything at all. If they have eyes, they are completely pointless. It's also very cold. The average temperature of the water at the bottom of our oceans is about 2 degrees centigrade. That's about the temperature of a cold and frosty morning in winter. Every animal in the world has specific characteristics about how they live and what they look like that means that they're able to survive in their environment. And these are called adaptations. I'm going to show you a few cool adaptations deep sea animals have been able to make to mean that they can find food in this extreme dark and cold deep sea environment. So some animals have become what we call scavengers, which means they come along and eat other dead animals when they fall through the water column. This video shows a deep sea fish tearing off chunks of a fish that was put down on an experiment by some researchers from the University of Aberdeen in Scotland. They put down a camera and the dead fish attached to it into the deepest part of the world's oceans called the Marianas Trench to find out what lives there. And they found out that surprisingly a lot lives there. You might also notice this huge white animal too on the right-hand side. This is a giant amphipod, which is related to the woodlice that you see in your garden, or more closely, it's related to the jumping sea fleas that you might have seen when you're at the rock pools on the beach. The woodlice and sea fleas on land and in shallow water are about 1 centimetre big or even smaller. They'll never be any bigger than the fingernail on your pinky finger. These giant amphipods are 30 centimetres big. That's about the size of your head. Imagine finding a woodlouse in your garden that was about twice as big as your head. You might be wondering how these animals know where the dead animals are for them to eat if they can't see anything in the deep sea. Well, because it's so dark, over millions of years, these fish and amphipods have made adaptations to be able to pick up the chemicals in the water and smell the fresh body so they can come and eat it. That's disgusting. They smell using their bodies. Some other animals are called deposit feeders. This means they just trudge slowly along the sea floor and eat all the marine snow that has fallen on the ground. They don't need to be able to do this. They just feel where all the floor is. For example, this is a sea cucumber and it's called a continuous deposit feeder because they go along constantly eating all of the marine snow that has fallen on the sea floor. They do this 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. But the problem with the fact that you are continuously eating is that you also have to continuously poop. And I mean all the time. They poop all day and all night. As they crawl along the floor, you can always see a sea cucumber because it leaves these really long trails behind it. And like this curly one here, that's a poo. They leave big long trails of poo all along the deep sea floor. In fact, the most disgusting part is another sea cucumber will come along behind this one and eat its poo trail. And then another sea cucumber will come along after that and eat its poo trail. It's disgusting. But there's such limited food in the deep sea that animals don't want any food to go to waste, even if it's poo. So they eat each other's poo. Gross. This particular type of sea cucumber you can see here is called a sea pig because it's pink and it looks like he has little legs like a pig. I'm never sure that it looks like a sea pig. I don't know what you think, but I think it's quite cute. Some animals have become suspension feeders. This means they attach themselves to some rock or another animal and they put their tentacles and other body parts into the water and catch the marine snow before it falls on the floor for the deposit feeders. This is a video of a crinoid, which is related to starfish that you might have seen. This crinoid has attached itself to a big sponge so that it can get higher up in the water and catch the marine snow. It catches the marine snow with these tiny tentacles that you can see, and they're actually called tube feet. They don't need to be able to see to do this because they have sensors on their tube feet, which means that they can feel the marine snow when it touches their body. And when they feel that they've caught a piece, they will fold their arms in and they will put their tube feet into their mouth and then they will eat the marine snow off it. You can see in comparison to the video that I showed you earlier of the marine snow that the water here is very, very clear. And that's because there's hardly any marine snow at all in the deep sea. So these crinoids will catch food much less often, which is why they need to have these adaptations to be able to make the most of the food that they have. Crinoids are actually some of the Earth's oldest animals, and they are way older than dinosaurs. In fact, the oldest fossil we know of a crinoid is 488 million years old. The dinosaurs died 68 million years ago, so these crinoids are way older. And look, if you wait for a sec, on the right-hand side, that's a little baby crinoid. So that crinoid will one day grow up to be big like the other crinoid. And finally, some animals in the deep sea have become absolutely terrifying with their adaptations. They become predators, which mean they attack and eat other animals. They have some very, very extreme adaptations to mean that they can do this. And I'm going to show you this one example. You'll probably have seen the anglerfish before, because it's the big, deep sea, scary fish that you see in Finding Nemo. The sea is completely dark where the anglerfish and its prey live, so it has a lure on its head which looks like a fishing rod on the top of its head, which has a light on it. You can probably see it in this video now. The only reason you can see the fish in this video is because the underwater robot that has a camera on it has lights on. Usually this would be in the complete darkness, and all you would be able to see is this glowing fishing rod on the top of this anglerfish's head. Other fish see the light on the top of the anglerfish's head and they want to know what it is. They think maybe it's something for them to eat. They must be really hungry in the deep sea. So they swim towards the light. But they don't know that the anglerfish is a sit-and-wait predator, sitting there and waiting for the fish to get close enough before it opens up its huge jaws that have these giant teeth, which makes a cage, which traps the fish in it. And guess what? It swallows it whole, doesn't even chew it. Lots of animals like the anglerfish then have really stretchy stomachs, which means that they can eat prey that's even bigger than they are. This is a video from where I work at the Natural History Museum in London. This anglerfish specimen is very, very rare because when it was caught in a net from the deep sea, it had just eaten a very large dinner. This is the story of how scientists found out the anglerfish's last supper. Please give me thumbs up to let me know that you can hear the audio on this one when I play it.
It's incredibly rare. So little is known about them. It lives very deep, below 1,000 meters. It's called a hairy anglerfish because it has these long, bristly fin rays that make it look quite hairy. We have only one specimen in our collection. It's the biggest one that's ever been found. One of the reasons why it looks quite big is it has a very big, bulging stomach, and we're fascinated to know what's inside. We don't want to cut it open because it's such a rare specimen, we don't want to damage it. This is where the head is. I can feel the hard, bony jaw of the fish, and it curls round, and then the tail is there. The CT scan is like a three-dimensional X-ray, so we can look at the stomach contents from every angle and we can examine it in a lot more detail.
You can see this is the mouth of the anglerfish with some teeth. Yes. These are just preliminary shots, and once we've actually scanned the specimen and reconstructed the data, we should be able to see this in a full 3D volume.
The most important use of the CT scanner is to be able to look really intimately into the insides of an animal, but without doing any damage to it.
There we are.
That ball thing is one of its eyes.
Is that the eye of the anglerfish or the prey?
The eye is up here.
Ah, okay.
There's its mouth and there's its teeth. It probably ate it head first because this thing probably came in to look at the light that the anglerfish has, and then the anglerfish grabbed it and then sort of swallowed it, and its stomach has expanded to sort of fit it all in.
And these bright bits here that seem to be a lot more dense than the rest of the bone.
They're the ear bones. They call them otoliths, and they're very distinctive. They've got very unique diagnostic features, so it might be possible to tell exactly what species it is by getting a good look at those. We were able to get a really lovely image of the prey fishes, the otoliths. We sent that to the world expert in otoliths, and that gave us a real helping hand with the whole investigation. And it's Rulina atrita, the soft-skinned smooth head. Here at the Natural History Museum we have one of the biggest and best collections of deep sea and midwater fishes from the Atlantic in the world. And so of course we already have specimens of Rulina atrita. They've been a bit bashed up during the capture, but this gives you a rough idea of the size and sort of general shape of the fish inside the anglerfish. And you can see, looking at it, some of the features that are obvious on the scan. You can see the big eye with the big lens in the middle. It's a bit like, I don't want to bend it too much, but it's sort of like that inside. Everything fits. The size fits, all the fin ray counts fit, and most importantly, and this is the thing that narrows it down to the exact species, it's the number of bones in its backbone. We ended up having to scan the specimen 3 times, but the final results we got were so beautiful that it was worth it. Now when people ask what's inside its stomach, I can give them a definite answer.
Okay, so can you all hear me again? Can I get a thumbs up? Yeah, good thumbs up, like that. So what we just saw was, because the scientists didn't want to cut up this anglerfish because it was such a beautiful specimen, they used a machine called a CT scanner. And it's like an X-ray machine that we use in hospitals when we break our bones. Using the machine, they were able to see inside this massively stretched stomach of the anglerfish and see the bones of the other fish that it ate just before it died. And do you want to know something that was even cooler? After these videos were made, I know the scientists in this video, and when they looked even closer, they saw that the fish that the anglerfish had eaten, if I can get my cursor here, so this is the anglerfish, the whole thing, and then this is the backbone of the fish that it ate just before it died. What they found out is that the fish that the anglerfish had eaten had also just eaten another fish, and that was its backbone inside the other fish. So you've got an anglerfish with a fish inside it that has another fish inside it. So a fish and a fish and a fish. I think that's really, really amazing. And I bet they wish they waited to make the video a little bit later, because that would have been really interesting. So just to summarize, we now know lots about the deep sea. We know that it's very, very big, and it's about 90% of our oceans. We know that there is no light below 200 meters, so the tiny plants at the bottom of the food chain in the surface ocean can't live in the deep sea. This means that all of the animals below 200 meters rely on marine snow, which falls from the surface ocean all the way to the deep sea. We also know that there is no light at all below 1,000 meters, which means it's completely dark here. And also that it's really cold, about 2 degrees centigrade. So that's why we call it an extreme environment. This means that animals have come up with lots of amazing adaptations to mean that they can live and survive in this extreme environment. I'm hoping to talk about these cool adaptations in another session in a few weeks, where I'll ask you to make your own deep sea fish with the best adaptations to find food in the extreme deep sea environment. Let me know if you'd like to do this. This is a video when I made some with another school before. So they all made them with different adaptations to mean they could live in the deep sea, and they all gave them a really cool Latin name. So this is the time when I stop sharing my screen and I stop talking. And now it's your time to ask me questions. So if you want to ask me a question, you need to, if you're watching on an iPad or an iPhone, then you need to go to the bottom of your screen and press the 3 little buttons that say more. And then you put your hand up. And then when I choose you to have your question answered, I will unmute you so that you can ask a question. So I can see someone's got their hand up, and I'm going to unmute them. Okay, the first person was Tamsin Henvest. So I'm unmuting you now. What's your question? Hiya.
Do you know how the anglerfish died?
How the anglerfish died? Well, unfortunately, it was caught in a fishing net. And the fish that the people were trying to catch wasn't actually the anglerfish. So it was accidentally caught up in the net. And so when it came up to the surface in a fishing net, it unfortunately died. But that's why the fishermen then contacted the Natural History Museum and would have said, you know, we've got this anglerfish, and that's how it was then used for science. So it was very sad that it ended up dying, but at least it was then used for some science. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you very much. I have another one.
Next person, we've got Stacey Robertson. I've unmuted you, off you go. Oh. Are you still wanting to answer a question, Stacey, or Stacey's children? Okay, we'll move on to the next one. We've got Catherine Firmager next, so unmute. Catherine, feel free to ask your question.
What species of fish was inside the fish that the anglerfish ate?
Do you know what? I should have looked that up, shouldn't I? And I don't know. So how about I promise to go and ask James at the museum, and then I will post it in the Facebook group where this is. What was your name?
Zach.
Zach, I will say that Zach wants to know, and I will post your answer this week in the Facebook group. How about that?
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks, Amber.
Good question. Okay, next person with their hand up. It just says iPad. So if you get a notification coming through, I assume your name isn't iPad. So I'm going to unmute you, and you should get a notification, and you can ask your question.
Oh, I think it might be us.
Oh, your iPad. Hi, iPad.
What are we called iPads? Hi, Amber. That was brilliant. Thank you. Tommy would like to know, what is the smallest fish that lives in the deep sea?
Oh, the smallest fish. Oh, I'll have to think about that. I don't know what the smallest fish is that lives in the deep sea, but there are animals that are much smaller than fish in the deep sea that are called invertebrates. So they're animals that don't have backbones. So humans have backbones, and all mammals have backbones, and fish all have backbones. So they're all vertebrates. But often there's tiny, tiny animals called invertebrates that don't have backbones, and they're even smaller than fish. So there's tiny, tiny microbes that you couldn't even see with the human eye that live in the deep sea. But the smallest things would probably be things like tiny, tiny jellyfish that are invertebrates. Some of these have really cool adaptations. That means they have lights all over them so that they really confuse all the predators. So there's light up jellyfish in the deep sea. There's also this really, really weird animal that's related to that's an amphipod, like the one I showed you in the picture, the big white animal. And that's really tiny as well, and it's called a pram bug. And the reason it's called a pram bug is because it comes along and it'll find a jellyfish and it'll eat all its insides out and make it hollow, and then it will climb inside the body of the dead jellyfish, or called a salp, and then it will get inside and it will live in there, and then it will lay its eggs inside this dead body of the jellyfish, and it will be like and then it will push the little babies around when they're born, like a little pram in the deep sea. So that's why it's called a pram bug. And that's really tiny, like this big as well. So the smallest animals are probably not fish in the deep sea. They are all these different invertebrates that I can put some pictures on the page of. So I'm sorry I can't tell you what the smallest fish is, but I've told you things that are even smaller. So I hope that's okay.
That's cool, thank you.
Cheers. Okay, next one we've got Carly's iPad. So I will unmute you now. Carly's iPad, feel free to ask your question.
So we were wondering what your favourite fish in the deep sea is.
My favourite fish in the deep sea. I have to say, I do like the anglerfish, but for me, he's a little bit too mainstream. I think he's got too cool for his own boots because he was in Finding Nemo and he thinks he's famous now. So I think I really like this fish that is called a Gulper Eel. And I will post a picture and a video of the Gulper Eel in the Facebook group so you can all see it after the session. But it's this fish that looks more like a worm. It's got a tiny worm-like body and then this huge face. And this face has what we call a distendable jaw. So if I turn to the side, you can see my jaw opens like that. This fish has a jaw that would drop all the way down here. So it would go whoa, like this, and it would have this huge jaw that opens, and then it means that it can eat fish maybe 4 times as big as its own head. and then it swallows it whole. And this worm-like body has some really cool molecules in it, all these different proteins, that means it's super stretchy, and then it gets massive. And then it'll digest that over a long time, maybe a week or two. That'll be the only meal it has for like maybe 2 weeks. And then it will digest it, and then it will find another big one and do it all over again. So it'll go big, small, with this terrifying big jaw. So I think that's one of my favourite fish in the deep sea.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Okay, next question. We've got some coming through on the Zoom chat, so I'm going to go through and answer those. I've got a question here. Why did you choose to study the deep sea? I chose to study the deep sea because you see, I'm so old now that I was around when the first Blue Planet series came out. Sorry to the parents saying that makes me old, but you know, to the kids, I'm super old, right? So I was around when the first Blue Planet series came out, and you might have seen Blue Planet 2 last year. So that came out when I was about 6 years old, and I watched David Attenborough, and there was all these people, marine biologists, doing all this cool sea stuff. And everyone seemed to be having a great time looking at corals and all these cool fish in the shallow water. And then I saw people that were deep sea biologists in the episode where everything was dark and there was all this cool bioluminescence with light and these crazy anglerfish and things fighting and finding all this food and hydrothermal vents, which I'm going to talk about in another episode with you guys. And I just thought it was so cool. And what I really enjoyed is they kept saying that we don't know much about the deep sea. I'm telling you lots about it, but there are thousands and thousands of species that human eyes have never seen because it's so far away and dark. So that's why I chose to study the deep sea, because there is so much that we don't know, that there's always something exciting for me to learn. We've got a question, how long have anglerfish been around? Oh, that is a good question, and that's really testing my evolutionary biology. Which I have to admit I don't remember, but I will answer that question. I would say not as long as the crinoids, which are 488 million years, not quite that long, but it's still definitely, you know, millions of years. So I will find out that answer for you and post it in the group. Agnes would like to know how the light bit works. Oh, is that the light on the anglerfish? That's a really good question. I was going to talk about that and then thought I was talking too much. So I'm glad I get to answer that question. So the light bit, the anglerfish isn't actually making the light itself. There are bacteria that live on that little round bit on the top of the fishing rod it has on its head. And those bacteria make light using really weird chemical reactions. So when the anglerfish is born, it just hopes that these bacteria will land on its little fishing rod on its head, and the bacteria live there all of the anglerfish's life, and it's actually the bacteria that make the light, not the anglerfish, which most people don't know. So that's really cool. That's a really good question. Thank you. Isaac, age 6, thinks that the fish inside the anglerfish might have been a shrimp. Okay, so that is a good thought. It could have been a shrimp because it was probably about the size of a big shrimp, but the way that they knew it wasn't a shrimp is because it had a backbone. So as I was saying earlier, you've got two big types of animals. You've got vertebrates, which have a backbone, like humans and fish, and you have invertebrates that don't have a backbone, like crabs and shrimp and jellyfish and things like that. And so because they could see a backbone curled up inside the fish, they know it must be a vertebrate. So I know with the question earlier, I will go and find out if I can find a picture and the name of the fish that the anglerfish did. But that's very good scientific thinking there, Isaac. Well done. I'm going to go back to some of the hands up at the moment. I don't know if there are people that have asked questions already, but I'm going to unmute you if you did have another question. So we've got Carly, I'm going to unmute you. I don't know if it's because you've got another question.
No, we don't have another question. Have you got another question?
No, that's fine.
We're very interested in listening very intently.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're enjoying it. So maybe the other people don't have questions still. I will unmute you just in case you have a question. I've unmuted someone else. Did you have another question?
Hello, yes. Is that us?
Oh, yeah.
Hello. I'm Jack. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
How many living creatures are there in the ocean, in the deep sea?
Oh my goodness. So there was a scientific paper written about this about 3 years ago by one of my colleagues. And the problem is that we don't know because we haven't found them all. So I think they found tens of thousands at the moment. But I think they're estimating hundreds of thousands of animals in the deep sea. So I think we found, I can't remember exactly how many. I think in the seas in total, I think it's something like, and this might be wrong and I'll find out, I think it's something like nearly 300,000 that we know so far. But in the deep sea on its own, it's difficult to tell because there's so many that we haven't discovered yet. Because you imagine how dark it is. When you go down there, it's cold, it's dark, you can't see anything. So we have to send underwater robots down there. And the underwater robots are like tiny in comparison to like the huge deep sea. So we don't find a lot of things very often. So there's still a lot left to discover, but there's definitely tens of thousands that we know of already, but it will be hundreds of thousands as we keep discovering more deep sea species. So basically you all need to become deep sea scientists because we need people to go and discover these and build the robots to go and find them and build the cameras and take videos and look at all the shrimp and the fish and, you know, all of these different jobs. We need people to come and discover the animals. So hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you. What can I smell?
Okay, Sally, did you have another question? Or is that just still up from before? No, cool, okay. So I haven't got any other hands up, but I do have still a lot of, oh no, I do have another hands up. Jenna, okay, ask your question now.
Sorry, so my daughter Anna, who's 5, wants to know, have you been down to the ocean and do you go down much?
Have I been down to the ocean? Oh, that is my dream. So I spend a lot of time on research ships, and in the UK, we generally have what are called remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, which is where you send an underwater robot with a camera and kind of manipulator arms to pick up the animals. You send that into the sea and it's remote control. You would control it like a games console, but very complicated from the ship. So I've done that and I've been at sea doing that before for over a month and not seen land. So that's super cool. So in the UK, we generally use remote controlled vehicles, so we don't go down into the sea ourselves. However, a lot of my colleagues, even though they're from the UK, we partner a lot with other countries like America and Japan, and they still have what are called manned submersibles, so basically a submarine. And I'll find some pictures of those. There's one really cool one at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in America. It's actually where I'm wearing my shirt from. And that one has an underwater vehicle that people go in called Alvin. And it's like a big sphere that's able to withstand really, really high pressure. And you have 2 people, I think, sat in there at once. So you have a pilot, and I think it's 3. I think you can have a pilot and 2 research scientists. And you're in there for 8 hours. There's nowhere to go to the toilet. I don't know why this is my dream to go into Alvin, but it is. So a lot of my colleagues, if they go on like the Japanese or the Chinese or the American research cruises, they get to go down in these submersibles, and that would be so amazing. So that's my dream. That's like my career dream.
They might do it, don't they?
Go in that. Okay, so thank you very much. So
Thank you.
Thank you. So I haven't got any more hands up, but I've got questions in the chat. So but what is the biggest fish in the deep sea? So the biggest fish in the deep sea, I think it will be certain types of shark. I'm not sure exactly which species of shark it is, but I think that it's a shark. It's potentially the 6-gill shark. I know that's the rarest of the sharks in the deep sea. And there was a video of that, I think, in the first Blue Planet Deep Sea episode. So I think I can probably try and send you that so you can see it. But they are huge. So the biggest fish, I imagine, it will be a species of shark. I know that you get 6-gill sharks in the deep sea, so it may well be that one. But you do find even bigger animals down there that aren't fish. Whales. So, for example, like a sperm whale will be able to dive down about 6,000 meters deep. And in the deep sea, something I didn't talk about today is there is really, really high pressure pushing in on them and nearly crushing them, but they're so strong they can dive down to 6,000 meters deep. So there's even bigger animals than sharks in the deep sea. Of course, you've got huge animals like the giant squid. So I'm hoping to share a video of the giant squid with you at some point, because we've got one in the Natural History Museum in our basement, and that's 8.5 meters long. That's huge. So you've got giant squid, whales, big sharks. So you do still get big animals in the deep sea. So the biggest fish is a certain species of shark, and it might be the 6-gill shark. I will find that out for you. So Emily has said, do fish swim freely around the ocean, or can fish drown? Well, interesting. So a lot of fish have something called a buccal system, which is very complicated, but basically it means that they've got gills on the side of their heads, and it basically means that they can swim in a forward direction, and they're absolutely fine and they won't drown. The water just flows through their gills and they take the oxygen out of the water like we take oxygen out of the air. But it wouldn't work if they swam backwards. So, they wouldn't, fish don't or can't swim backwards, but I guess if you pulled a fish backwards through the water, that probably wouldn't be great for it and it might be able to drown. So generally fish don't drown, but because they have this clever adaptation of like ram ventilation and a buccal system, which means that all of this water just flows through their gills, they take out the oxygen and it flows back out and it doesn't get into their organs. So let's not, go around pulling fish backwards through the sea. Otherwise, they might drown. How do the smaller creatures in the deep sea make themselves light up? So that is a very complicated question. Thanks, Rosie. It's called bioluminescence. So bio means biology, so animals and plants and things like that. And luminescence basically means emitting light. So that's what bioluminescence is. And the way that they put light out is a chemical reaction. So I won't go into the full chemical reaction, but basically it's a process that happens inside them that means all these chemicals and molecules come together, and that process means that they emit light. And it's really cool. So I'm hoping, I'm not an expert in bioluminescence myself. I know a little bit. So I can do a presentation on it if you want, but I'm hoping that I can find one of my friends that does about bioluminescence to see if they can come and do a presentation for you at some point, because I think bioluminescence is super cool. So thank you for your question. So I think we've got another question over here. I've unmuted you if you have another question.
Do colossal squid exist?
Yes, they do. And we've got a specimen in the Natural History Museum. So we've got a giant squid and a colossal squid. And we've only got a full specimen of a giant squid. He's called Archie. He's 8.2 meters long.
But is he alive?
He's not alive, unfortunately. He also
Why is he in?
He's also in a fishing net. He came up in a fishing net. And then I think near the Falkland Islands, near Antarctica. And then the fishermen at the Natural History Museum knew that they'd caught it, and that's how we have a complete specimen of a giant.
Can you show a picture of it?
I think I can probably share a picture in the group on the Facebook chat, on the Facebook group later. I can't show it to you now, but I can probably send it over to the Facebook group in about half an hour if you can wait that long. Is that okay?
Thank you.
That's all right, but the difference between a colossal squid and a giant squid isn't just their size, they have a difference in their tentacles. So one of them, you know the suckers that you see on like a squid and an octopus's tentacles?
But they have teeth in and one doesn't.
They do, that is great knowledge. So they've got these little hooks on, and one has the hooks and one doesn't. The one with the hooks, I think it's the colossal squid, and it's absolutely terrifying. It's like tentacles with teeth. It's terrifying. So I will find a picture and share that for you later, but a really good question. Yes, colossal squids are real. Okay, I've unmuted someone else with the hand up. Let me know if you want to ask a question.
There you go, Lisa.
You sure?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, my daughter Winnie would like to know, I think I typed why jelly stings. We meant why jellyfish sting.
Ah, okay. I hope the jelly I eat at dinner doesn't sting.
So why jellyfish sting?
So why do jellyfish sting? So,
Mummy's typo.
that's all right. So jellyfish, are actually quite useless, basically. They are made up of 90% water. They don't have a brain, and they are technically, most of them, plankton, because they can't actually swim against the currents in the ocean. So they're not really very good as animals at, you know, doing much like catching prey. But what does make them not useless is the fact that they have a sting. So this is why they have a sting. It's an adaptation, because they're so useless in so many other ways. They had to make a stinging mechanism. And they have tiny cells, and here you go, I'm going to throw a science word at you now. They are called nematocysts, and they're tiny cells in their tentacles. And in their tentacles, these nematocysts fire out chemicals which will sting the prey that it wants to eat. And then the prey will be all stunned and like, oh, like this. And then the tentacles will be able to wrap around it and it can eat the animal. But because they can't actively swim and they have no brain and they're a bit useless, that's why they've got this really powerful ability to sting, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to eat and catch prey. So that's another adaptation that animals have got to eat food. So that's a good question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to the questions on the chat. There's loads of them, loads and loads. Okay. Why is it so dark in the deep sea? Excellent question. Also wanted to put this in the presentation, but didn't have enough time. The sun is the source of light for all of our planet. And when light goes into water, water is much thicker than air. And so the light finds it much more difficult to travel through water. So where, you know, if you shine a light in the air, the light goes really, really far. If you shine a light in water, because it's so much more difficult for the light to be able to push through the water, it starts getting absorbed. And so when it goes through the water, it's absorbed and the light disappears. And so the first light that disappears is red light. And so that's why when you look at stuff underwater, in the shallow water, everything looks blue, because all the red light has been absorbed by the water. And then as you get deeper, more and more of this blue light is absorbed. And finally, when all of the light from the sun is absorbed, it's completely black. So that's why below 200 meters, so much of the light has been absorbed that the plants, the plankton, the phytoplankton can't do photosynthesis anymore. And then below 1,000 meters, it's completely dark because all of the different colors of light have been absorbed. And so that's why it's dark, because there's no source of light other than bioluminescence in the deep sea. So that's the only light you would be able to see is the light made by animals. So good question. We've got Morgan. Do you know why goblin sharks have a long snout? Do you know what? I don't know why, but I can have a bit of a guess. So I think it's because I think goblin sharks, they have that second jaw, don't they? And so they have a jaw, and then inside their jaw they have a second jaw. And so when they go and catch an animal, they'll have a long snout, I guess, so that that first jaw will come out really, really far. So if the fish is swimming towards you here, it's then got a really large surface area to be able to trap the fish in. And then the second jaw will come out inside the jaw and go, hum, and eat the animal. So you've got a jaw like this, which is the goblin shark with this really long snout. So if the fish swims in here, it's now got this big, large area like a cage to trap it in. And then this second jaw will go, hum, like this. So I can only guess that that's why they have such a long nose, is to make that cage that they would catch this fish in so much bigger. And then what's your best bit of advice to anyone who wants to be a marine biologist? Okay, my best bit of advice is watch the Blue Planet series, because they are excellent. Another thing to do is, if you get any opportunity to go to the beach, go. Look in the rock pools, take pictures of the things in rock pools, Google them, find out why they're different colours, find out why they're living in different places. Think about, when you're looking at rock pools, why you find some animals in the rock pools near the sea and different animals in rock pools that you find far away from the sea, and then start Googling all the answers. But watching lots of documentaries about the sea is the thing that inspired me the most, and reading books and encyclopedias about the sea. But really, one of the best things to do is just spend any time that you can at the beach, looking at the animals that live in the rock pools. That's the easiest thing to do to be a marine biologist. And also do well at science at school, because science is cool. So we've got, how does plastic get into the sea if it's not been on the beach? Okay, that's a really good question. There's lots of different ways that plastic gets into the sea, Sophie. Basically, some people leave it on the beach, as you know, and then it gets into the sea. Sometimes it comes out from ships at sea. So when ships are going along and they're taking rubbish around the world, or cruise ships and things like that, sometimes people will illegally dump it at sea, which is really, really naughty. And that it gets in that way. Some plastics are very light, and so they will blow from the land and they will fall into the sea. But the main source of plastic into our oceans, if it's not on the beach, is from rivers. And that's because people leave their rubbish on the side of the road and in fields and things like that on land. And then they will, when it rains, and when it's windy, that will get washed into the rivers. And then the rivers, every single river in the entire world leads to the sea. And so that's the main way that plastic gets into the sea. But there's also something to consider, is microplastics as well. So these tiny, tiny little bits of plastic and plastic fibres that we can't actually see without a microscope. And these come out in all of our sewage water, the toilet water, the laundry water. So there's lots of things you can think about in your home to try and catch microfibres so that they don't get into our sewers and they don't go out into the sea. So good question. How do the small fish see the underwater snow to eat it? Good question. They can't if it's below 1,000 metres in the deep sea. So they don't see it, they don't use their eyes. In fact, a lot of fish in the deep sea have basically lost their eyes, and the ones that have eyes only have it there to see the bioluminescence of other prey. So how do they see the underwater snow? They don't see it, they feel it. And some animals, it's basically like smell, so they will smell where it is. Some of them have receptors all along their body that means they can feel tiny movements in the water, and electrochemical signals, and so they can feel when a piece of marine snow moves past them in the water. They can feel it and they'll eat it that way. So they don't see the marine snow, they can sense it in the water. It's almost, they have extra senses to the ones that we have.
You can speak. Hello, can you hear us? No.
Oh, hang on, somebody was talking. Did somebody want to ask a question?
No, you can ask a question.
How long is a whale shark?
Sorry?
How long is a whale shark?
How long is a whale shark? Oh goodness, I should know this, shouldn't I? Well, I know it's the biggest fish in the sea. And I don't actually, I want to say like 6 or 8 meters long, but I will find that fact out for you. But they are the biggest fish in the sea. So they're absolutely huge. So yeah, I will find out the exact length of a whale shark for you, if that's okay. Good question. What have we got now? Lots of comments. Is there an anglerfish in every deep sea? Okay, so that's another cool thing about the deep sea, is the deep sea all around the world is connected. There isn't just one, there isn't just, you know, lots of different deep seas. It's all the same. Also, but animals don't necessarily travel around the whole world. But if you wanted to, you could go from one area of the deep sea all the way around and travel all the way around the world and back. So all of the currents do eventually go through the whole deep sea. But yeah, there's different ocean basins. So you've got the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian Ocean. And yes, I think there's a species of anglerfish that lives in every ocean basin of the deep sea. What's the largest jellyfish in the deep sea? Actually, I think that the jellyfish in the deep sea don't get that big. I guess it's because there's not a lot of food there, and because they can't swim around and actively catch predators, I guess that they need to stay quite small, so they need a minimal amount of food. But there are animals closely related to jellyfish called siphonophores, and they found this one that they called the giant spaghetti monster, and it's absolutely huge. So I will post a picture and a video of when they discovered this huge siphonophore, which is related to a jellyfish. Do you know anything about the water column? Yes, I do. So for people that don't know what the water column is, the water column is basically all of the water in the sea. And it's called a water column because it goes from the top all the way down to the bottom. So that's how we describe marine snow. We say it falls through the water column. And as you go through the water column, all of the different types, you get different types of water as you go through. So first of all, it's getting colder, which means that the water is heavier. It will get saltier, which also makes the water heavier. So yeah, there's all sorts of different things that are really interesting about the water column, but that is where all the marine snow falls through. What else have we got? Do you know how long an anglerfish is? An anglerfish, actually, surprisingly, they're not that big. There's lots of different species of anglerfish, but I think the biggest one isn't much bigger than this. But even though it's only probably about this big, it could eat prey that was much bigger than itself because it's got that stretchy belly. What else have we got? Can humans swim in the deep sea? No, humans can't swim in the deep sea. So humans can't actually go very deep. Humans can dive down to like maybe 100 meters if they've got really specialist equipment and very special outfits on. But because the pressure pushing on them, the water is so heavy as they get further and further down into the deep sea, actually, it's so much pressure you can't swim down there. So the only way humans can visit the deep sea is in some kind of submarine. We've got, do shipwrecks go to the bottom of the deep sea? Yes, they do. There are lots of shipwrecks that are found very, very deep down in the deep sea, and lots that we probably will never discover. Every time we send a camera down there, we find all sorts of stuff down there. So, you know, the Titanic was found in the deep sea. There's all sorts of shipwrecks in the deep sea. So really good question. How do jellyfish survive without any vital organs, heart, brain, and digestive system? Really good question, Rosie. So instead of a brain, they have a thing called a nerve net, which is basically like a primitive brain. It's not a proper brain, it's just lots of, you know, in our brain we have nerves, these big long nerves that send signals all around our body. They have a nerve net that comes together. So they don't really think, but they can do enough things. The nerve net does enough to be like, move my left third tentacle, and they can do that. So that's a nerve net, I think, instead of a brain. They don't need a heart because they haven't got any fluid like blood to pump around their bodies because they're 90% water. So that's how they keep their bodies kind of strong enough in the water. It's full of water instead of other fluids like blood. And a digestive system, they do have a very basic gut. So they're just a tiny little sac right in the center of, you know, that bell shape of the top of the jellyfish. They have a tiny little gut. So it's not like a full digestive system, but they do have a gut that's connected to their mouth, basically mouth and a gut, and then it excretes, and that's about it. And so it will catch the food with the tentacles, put it into its mouth, which will go into its gut, and then all of the enzymes in the gut will break it down, and then it will be excreted out. So it doesn't have organs like we know it, but it does have these very primitive organs, which is what we think that the animals that first evolved on the planet millions of years ago have. So they had these kind of primitive, very simple organs. We've got, how big is the deep sea? Big. It's 90% of the habitable ecosystem on the planet. So if you think of it in terms of volume, if the planet's this big, nearly all of it is deep sea. It makes up 90% of the area that animals can live in the deep sea, in the world. So big. I can't give you an exact quantity of how much water is in the deep sea, but I'm sure I could find that out somehow. But it basically, if you look at a picture of the world, you think 90% of that blue space is deep sea, then that's how big the deep sea is. What's the largest predator? So interestingly, the largest predator isn't the same as the largest fish, which is the whale shark, because the whale shark isn't actually a predator. It goes along like a basking shark, I think, and eats plankton out of the water, so it's not a predator. The largest predator, trying to think which, it will be a species of whale, I imagine, or the giant squid. But the largest whale, like the blue whale and things, they just eat plankton. So they're not predators. So I'm not sure which species of whale it is, but it will be one of the whales, I imagine, will be the largest predator. And if it's not that, then it will be the giant squid. And do you know how far down it is to the bottom of the deep sea? Yes, I do. It is 11,034 meters deep. So that's over 11 kilometers. So that's over 36,200 feet. So it's really, really deep. And there's a place called the Marianas Trench. So a trench is these areas of the deep sea that come down in like a V shape where they go really deep. And then at the bottom of the Marianas Trench, there is an even deeper bit called the Challenger Deep, which is the deepest part we know in the deep sea. And that's where some of those videos are from that I showed you with the giant amphipod and the fish. And then final question, why are they starting to deep sea mine and will it hurt the habitats? Okay, so that's what I work on, is deep sea mining. I won't go into it too much now, but it's basically they're looking for minerals to make iPhones and wind turbines and things like that in the deep sea. And it will hurt the habitats, yes. And so there's lots of scientists like myself that are trying to get science into the environmental kind of laws that are being written to protect these areas, so that hopefully, you know, less animals will be harmed from deep sea mining. But yeah, habitats will be harmed. We're just trying to look at how we can minimise the amount of habitats that might be harmed by this industry of deep sea mining. We've got two more questions. Does the whale shark have a large jaw? Yes, it does. It literally just has this giant mouth. It doesn't need like big teeth or anything. It's just got a huge mouth that opens up and swallows plankton, pulls all the plankton out of the water, and then pushes all the water back out. So it has this huge jaw so that it can take in so much plankton because it's so massive. And does plastic go to the bottom of the deep sea? That's our final question. And yes, unfortunately it does. Some of my colleagues and myself has found a lot of plastic in the deep sea. We found Coca-Cola cans as well. We found milk bottles, welly boots, also a lot of old fishing gear, which a lot of the nets are made of plastic. That all ends up in the deep sea. And even some of the kind of mussels and things that have been found in the deep sea, like the shellfish and things like that, they've been found to have tiny little microplastics that are used to make plastic bags for the supermarket. They've been found to have those in their gills and in their guts as well. So deep sea has got plastic in. Plastic is now known to be in every single marine environment that we've studied. So we really do need to make conscious effort on land to reduce the amount of plastic that we're using and increase the amount that we're recycling so that we make sure less of it goes into the deep sea. So we have now answered all of our questions. So thank you so much for joining me today. You've had so many questions, my goodness me. Next week, we have another scientist coming to join us. I'll confirm who that is on the Facebook page, but they will be talking about seagrass. So yes, there is grass that grows in the sea and it grows around the UK as well. So we'll be looking at some cool videos and things of seagrass, so some shallower water stuff. And then we've got some other scientists coming on to read some storybooks, if I can find one here that somebody's going to read. We've got a colleague of mine who is going to come on and read you this book called Treasures of the Deep, and it's all about the deep sea and deep sea mining. So they're going to come along and read this to you and then answer questions about it. We've got all sorts planned for the next few weeks. So at the moment, I'm going to keep it to being at 13:30, so 1:30 on a Friday. But if it turns out we have so many people volunteering to do sessions for you guys, which it is looking like, then I will try and look into doing it more than once a week. But at the moment, keep your eye on the Facebook page, and I will see you again at 1:30 next Friday. So thank you so much, everyone. You've been fabulous. And see you all next week. Stay safe, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
So thank